Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 9 articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll be taking up is related to interstate water disputes, as the Delhi government is going to approach the Supreme Court for getting its share of the Yamuna water. The second article is related to tobacco epidemic, as today is World No Tobacco Day. The third article is related to hate speech, as the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has accused the Prime Minister Modi of lowering the dignity of Prime Minister's office with hate speeches. The fourth article is related to drug menace, as the state of Punjab is grappling with the menace of drugs. The fifth article is related to Special Marriage Act, as the Madhya Pradesh High Court has observed that a marriage between a Muslim man and a Hindu woman under the Special Marriage Act will not be valid under the personal laws. Additionally, we'll be taking up 4 topics in the prelim snippet. Now, the first topic is related to interstate water disputes. The context behind it is that the Delhi government is going to approach the Supreme Court for getting its share of the Yamuna water. So, we'll be discussing the topic of interstate water disputes. We'll be starting with 2 case studies, one related to the Satluj-Yamuna link canal and another related to the Kaveri water dispute. And we'll be discussing the challenges associated with the resolution of interstate water disputes and a few solutions as well. This topic is important in GS2 under governance and GS1 and 3 under the topic water. Let's start with the first case study of Satluj-Yamuna link canal. Let's look at its background first. In 1955, the waters of Ravi and Byas, the volume and flow of the water was calculated and it was divided among the 3 states. The undivided Punjab, which consisted of Punjab and Haryana, and Rajasthan as well as Jammu and Kashmir. Accordingly, in 1966, after the Punjab Reorganization Act, Punjab was bifurcated into 2, the present day Punjab and Haryana, and the Satluj-Yamuna link canal was proposed. This canal is supposed to be a 211 kilometer long canal, out of which about 121 kilometer will be in Punjab and 90 kilometers will be in Haryana. The Haryana side of the proposed canal has already been constructed and completed, but in Punjab it could not be constructed. In 1980 itself, Haryana had completed its part of the SYL canal, the portion which is in Haryana, as you can see in the map. But there were protests by Shiromani Akali Dal in Punjab, and hence the construction of the Satluj-Yamuna link canal could not take off in the state of Punjab. And since Punjab was infested with insurgency around the 1980s, in 1985, the then Prime Minister of India had an accord with the Shiromani Akali Dal. According to the accord which was signed with the local party, the regional party, a tribunal was supposed to be established, and accordingly the Iradi tribunal was established. This tribunal was established to reassess, re-evaluate the water availability and the water needs of the regions and accordingly reallocate the shares. Therefore, it made recommendations giving more water to the states of Punjab and Haryana and lesser portion to Rajasthan, but the SYL link canal was supposed to be constructed. And it had to be constructed, but there was militancy in Punjab in those days. And even the chief engineer, the superintending engineer of the project, they were killed around 1990 and the construction work came to a halt. Then in 1996, the Haryana government approached the Supreme Court to ask the Punjab government to complete the SYL canal project, the construction of it in Punjab. And accordingly, in 2002, the Supreme Court issued a direction to Punjab to complete the work on the SYL canal within a year. But the Punjab came up with the Punjab Termination of Agreements Act around 2004, according to which it terminated all the existing agreements that it had signed for the sharing of waters through the various interstate rivers, water disputes, etc. For this, the act was referred to the Supreme Court by the President Abdul Kalam at that time to discuss and to evaluate its constitutionality. Accordingly, in 2016, the Supreme Court observed that the Act of Punjab, the Punjab Termination of Agreements Act, that is invalid, and Punjab is going back on its agreements, on its promises of sharing water with the other states. Accordingly, it has to construct the SYL canal. In 2020, again the Supreme Court observed that the chief ministers of the two states of Punjab and Haryana, they should negotiate, and the union government should also mediate between the two states to ensure a quick resolution of the dispute and to ensure that the river waters of Satluj, they are shared with Haryana also through Satluj-Yamuna Link Canal project. That is one case study. Another case study is related to the Kaveri water dispute. This also goes a long way back. The Kaveri water dispute started ever since 1892. This was a dispute between the presidency of Madras at that time and the princely state of Mysore of the time. In 1924, the princely state of Mysore and presidency of Madras, they actually entered into an agreement. The agreement for 50 years that they will be sharing water of Kaveri. But after the end of this agreement in 1974, Karnataka started diverting the water of Kaveri. It started diverting the water of Kaveri into 4 newly made reservoirs. This led to a scarcity of water in Tamil Nadu, which again approached the central government and Supreme Court. Accordingly, in 1990, the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal was formed. Now tribunals, the river water disputes tribunals are formed in India under Interstate Water Disputes Act 1956. Section 4 of this act authorizes the central government to establish tribunals to resolve the interstate water disputes. Now 17 years after the formation of this tribunal, it made its final award in 2007. This award was to determine the amount of water that each state will be receiving during different times of the year. During different months of the year, how much water Karnataka will be sharing with the state of Tamil Nadu. And this award also mandated the constitution of a monitoring authority, that there should be a monitoring authority which should be monitoring the amount of water which is being shared, which is being released by the state of Karnataka into Tamil Nadu. It did not give any detailed formula if the rains are deficient, if the rainfall is not sufficient. It just said that the sharing of water will be proportionally reduced between the states, and it had recommended the distribution of water between the 3 states, Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, as well as the Union Territory of Puducherry. It had also set aside a small amount for the environmental purposes, etc. Now, this order by the Interstate Water Disputes Tribunal for Kaveri, this was notified by the government in 2013, but Karnataka government expressed its inability to implement the award and did not implement the award of the tribunal, and therefore Tamil Nadu was forced to approach the Supreme Court. When it approached the Supreme Court in 2018, the Supreme Court gave a judgment in which it said that Kaveri is a national asset. The river Kaveri was declared to be a national asset, and in the judgment, the Supreme Court largely upheld the water sharing arrangements which were finalized by the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal. The same recommendations, they were largely upheld by the Supreme Court also, and it even gave the Kaveri Management Scheme, Kaveri Water Management Authority, etc. These are the 2 case studies of interstate water disputes in India. Now let's go a little back and discuss the mechanism of resolution of the interstate water disputes in India. This is not within the domain of the judiciary. Article 262 of the Indian Constitution explicitly bars the court's jurisdiction. It says that the resolution of the disputes related to water between 2 states, that is not within the domain of the judiciary. For this, as per the Article 262, the Parliament enacted the Interstate Water Disputes Act 1956. As per this act, the central government can establish tribunals for the adjudication of interstate water disputes. These tribunals will be giving the awards and resolving the disputes between 2 states. Now these tribunals which are established, they are not permanent tribunals. They are temporary tribunals only, and once they announce the final award, they are dissolved after the announcement of their reward, and the award of these tribunals, they have the force of the Supreme Court decree. It is as if the Supreme Court has passed an order, a decree, and they have the finality. Therefore, they are binding on the states also. Now, there are certain challenges in the resolution of the disputes in this manner. One, there are adversarial litigations. For example, even though the award of the tribunal, which is announced by the Interstate Water Disputes Tribunal, they are final and binding. They have the force almost equivalent to a Supreme Court judgment. But still, the states which are not happy with the tribunal award, they approach the Supreme Court through Article 136, which is the method of special leave petition. They file special leave petition in the Supreme Court, which causes further adjudication, and it causes chronic delays in the implementation of the tribunal awards. There are no avenues to redress grievances also, because once the award of the tribunal is announced, it is dissolved and there is no way to redress the grievances for the state. It even might lead to a constitutional crisis. For example, sometimes it pitches the legislature against the judiciary. Like the Supreme Court said that the Karnataka government has to implement the award which was announced by the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal, but the Karnataka government itself expressed inability to implement the Supreme Court order, which leads to a crisis. Plus, there is the issue of institutional vacuum for implementation of these awards. There is no fixed institutional architecture to implement the awards which are announced by the tribunals. They have to be done by the state governments only. And there are other factors like vote bank politics and the allocation which is supposed to be done during the deficit years, because during the times of deficit it becomes even more difficult. And there is an absence of transparent information gathering and sharing mechanism. The information has to be collected and shared with all the stakeholders. Now, what are the solutions for this issue? One, the solutions, they have to be multi-pronged. Only legal solutions will not suffice. They have to be backed with institutional solutions, technological solutions, as well as political will to resolve the disputes. Therefore, the government came up with the Interstate River Water Disputes Amendment Act of 2019. This 2019 step by the Parliament put in place certain mechanisms. One, it introduced the Dispute Resolution Committee. This Dispute Resolution Committee will be trying to resolve the dispute between the two states. It will have a mandate to resolve the dispute within 1 year. If it is not able to do it, the time will be extended by another 6 months. If it is not able to resolve the dispute in 1.5 years also, then it will be referred to a tribunal. The tribunal now will be a permanent tribunal. It won't be temporary. It won't be dissolved after the announcement of the awards. This tribunal will also have a time frame that it will announce the award within 2 years. This time limit is also extendable by another 1 year. So the total time frame to resolve the disputes now is 3 years by the tribunal plus 1.5 years by the Dispute Resolution Committee, that is a total of 4.5 years. Therefore, there is an upper limit which is set by the statute itself as compared to the earlier mechanism where there was no permanent mechanism, no permanent tribunal, and for example, the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal took 17 years to announce its award. Also, as per this bill, there will be an expert agency for the data collection, because it is important to collect the data related to rainwater, irrigation water, surface water, and this collection of data will be done at the basin level to ensure that in future the allocation of water will be based upon the hydrological and scientific data. Another mechanism can be to utilize the Interstate Council. Interstate Council is a good platform for the states, the chief ministers of the states and the decision-making authorities of the states to come together and discuss and resolve the disputes. Also, the Supreme Court has observed in the Kaveri judgment itself that the distribution of water between the states, it should not be equal but equitable. The Supreme Court even referred to the Helsinki rules and Campion rules. As per these rules, the factors which should be taken into account while determining the allocation of water include the hydrology of the basin, the climate of the region, the past utilization trends. For example, if a state has been utilizing the water of a river for long in the past, it has more right over the river water and the socio-economic needs of the region, so that the allocation of the water which is done between the states, that is based upon an equitable distribution, not equal numerical distribution between the states. Also, the court had observed that the state is not the owner of the river water. Rather, the state should act like the public trustees. And the problem can also be resolved by implementing feasible, practical and technological solutions. For example, the idea of 4R, which means reduce, reuse, recycle and recover, to ensure that the utilization of water that is done in an efficient and scientific manner. Now the next article is related to tobacco epidemic. The context behind it is that today is no tobacco day. This is important in GS2 under the topic health. Now let's look at the tobacco burden which the world and India are experiencing first. Globally, if we see, tobacco is causing 8 million deaths per year, which is including both direct tobacco consumption as well as indirectly affected people due to tobacco consumption. And 80% of the users of tobacco, they are living in the low and middle income countries. Only 20% people are in the high income countries. When we look at the case of India, it is projected by 2040 more than 2 million cancer cases will be there in India. And prominently there will be the cases of oral cancer patients, and 80 to 90% of the oral cancer patients, they are tobacco consumers, which points to a link that tobacco consumption leads to oral cancer. The mortality due to tobacco already is very high. More than 13.5 lakh deaths in India are attributed to the uses of tobacco. And when we look at the factor, lifestyle is also a big factor, particularly in some regions of India, for example in northern India. When we look at the impact of the government steps, the government took up a program of National Tobacco Control Program. It has led to a positive impact. When we look at this graph, the monthly consumption of BD sticks in the National Tobacco Control Program districts, it has come down from 2000 to 2012 from 100% to about 80%. Whereas in the non-National Tobacco Control Program districts, the monthly consumption of cigarette sticks, etc., that has not decreased as much. Now, what are the factors of tobacco consumption in India and tobacco production also in India? It is a lucrative business. One, India has suitable conditions, climatic conditions, agroclimatic conditions for the production of tobacco, because tobacco needs frost-free period of 100 to 120 days for its production, and it needs a well-distributed rainfall also. About 90 to 125 mm of rainfall per month is needed, and that rainfall should be spread all over the year rather than a concentrated rainfall. Also, it needs a relative humidity of 70 to 80% during nights, etc. Plus, there are various varieties of tobacco which are suitable for India. For example, the FCV variety can be grown on sandy loams, red loams and black cotton soils, etc. And this variety of Indian tobacco is particularly popular in the Western countries including Europe, US, Brazil, etc. When we look at the economic factors of the growth of tobacco in India, it accounts for about 0.27% of the net cultivated area and also accounts for 4% of the total agricultural exports from India. India is also the third largest producer of tobacco across the world, and it is also the second largest consumer of tobacco across the world. And the states which are the biggest producers of tobacco in India, they are Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. When we look at the employment that tobacco creates, about 36 million people are employed due to tobacco production, processing, making of tobacco products in India, which include farmers, farm laborers and workers, etc. More than 2 million people are engaged in the business of BD rolling alone. When we look at the exports, The major importers of the tobacco from India include UK, Germany, Belgium, South Korea and South Africa. But when we look at the production and export, the percentage of it, India produces 13% of the tobacco in the world, but it exports only 5% value of the global tobacco leaf exports. Whereas in the case of the Western countries or the major tobacco producers including Brazil, US, etc., they are exporting almost 50% of their local tobacco production. And India exports only about 30% of the total tobacco which is produced in India. But there are certain competitive advantages of Indian tobacco. For example, there are lower levels of heavy metals and pesticide residues in the Indian tobacco. Therefore, it is regarded as one of high quality and better quality. The agroclimatic conditions in India, they are suitable for growing different styles of tobacco because of the varied agroclimatic conditions, and hence various tobaccos like FCV, etc., they are grown in India. Plus the production cost in India, that is low because of the low labor cost, land cost, etc. Now what are the steps to control this menace by India as well as globally? In India, the government came up with the National Tobacco Control Program. This program includes promotion of awareness to control the consumption of tobacco and ensuring that the young people, they are not getting addicted to tobacco. The government also enacted the legislations including cigarette and other tobacco products, prohibition of advertisement and regulation of trade and commerce, Production, Supply and Distribution Act of 2003. As per this Cigarette and Other Tobacco Products Act, there is a restriction on the advertisement, promotion and sponsorship of the tobacco products, but the various companies, they have various workarounds to advertise their other products that they produce. Smoking in public places has been restricted under this act, and it also imposes restrictions on the sale to the minors. Also, the minors cannot sell tobacco themselves also. The sale can also not be done within 100 yards of educational institutions to ensure that the young people, they do not engage in the consumption of tobacco. And the act provides for the health warnings, that it is mandatory to put health warnings on all tobacco product packages. The government also came up with the Prohibition of Electronic Cigarettes Act 2019. This act prohibits the consumption of electronic cigarettes in India. Globally also there are measures, for example, the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, FCTC. Now this was enacted in 2003 and 182 countries are part of this convention, including India, which has also signed this convention. The WHO has also the Empower measures. These Empower measures are to ensure the implementation of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control of the WHO only, and it is to save lives and reduce costs from averted healthcare expenditure, which means that if there is no tobacco consumption, there will be lesser cases of cancer and associated health risks, and hence there will be lesser healthcare costs. Now the next article is related to hate speech. The context behind it is that the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has accused the Prime Minister Modi of lowering the dignity of Prime Minister's office with hate speeches. So we will be discussing the legal provisions related to hate speech as well as a few Supreme Court judgments related to hate speech. This is important in GS2 under the topic governance. It can be asked in ethics also. Now what is hate speech? Hate speech is essentially any expression which advocates or incites hatred, violence, discrimination between any groups, essentially any act which promotes disharmony in the public. It has not been defined anywhere in any law. Now, it causes various dangers. For example, it disturbs the peace in an area because it creates panic. It can lead to ethnic violence. And hate speech can lead to oppression of the minorities and the various groups who do not have a representation. And it can lead to adverse impacts on the economy. Because of the adverse impact on the law and order situation, there will be adverse impact on the investor sentiments and leading to lesser economic growth. It causes damage to livelihoods and takes away the cohesion of a democratic society. Since the social fabric is very finely knit in India because of the immense diversity, hate speeches can easily tear this social fabric, and it leads to lesser protection of the human rights because they can be violated because of the hate speech and the mongering. It leads to the problems of rule of law not being followed because of the hate speech and mob violence which can be caused through hate speech. It can lead to intolerance, hate crimes, etc. Now, Article 19 in the Indian Constitution guarantees the right to freedom of speech. This freedom of speech and expression, this is not an absolute right, rather there is a qualification imposed upon it. That is, Article 19 subclause 2 itself provides for reasonable restrictions which can be imposed upon the right to freedom of speech and expression, and hence any hate speech which is leading to violence, disharmony in public, etc., then that can be accordingly controlled. Now, when we look at the legal provisions, although the word hate speech has not been defined in any law, but there are some related provisions. For example, under the Indian Penal Code, Section 153A provides for a punishment if any person is promoting enmity between any groups on the basis of race, religion, place of birth, language, etc., or causing disharmony among any groups, then that person shall be punishable with the imprisonment of up to 3 years under Section 153A. Likewise, Section 505 imposes punishment if any person is making statements which are conducive to public mischief. They will ultimately lead to disorder in the public. Likewise, the Representation of People Act 1951 also includes Section 8. Section 8 says that any candidate will be disqualified, any candidate who is contesting the elections of the parliament or the state legislatures, they will be disqualified if they are illegitimately using the freedom of speech, that is, the usage of freedom of speech that is illegitimate by them, they will be disqualified. Also, under Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955, there is a provision under Section 7 which says that if any person is promoting untouchability, either by words spoken or written, or by any visible representation, or any signs, etc., or any actions, if he is promoting untouchability, then again he shall be punishable. Under the Religious Institutions Prevention of Misuse Act 1988, again there is a Section 3G. This Section 3G of the Religious Institutions Act provides that no religious institution is allowed to allow its premises to be used to promote enmity, to promote hate speech, violence, and it shall be punishable by law. Now, there are certain case laws also related to the hate speech. For example, under the Pravasi Bhalai Sangathan versus Union of India, the Supreme Court had observed that the existing laws related to hate speech, they should be implemented in their true letter and spirit, and the state should itself take a preemptory action. Rather than waiting for the hate speech to lead to something more dire, to lead to some violence or other public disorder, the state itself should take preemptory action, and the Law Commission of India can accordingly examine to define it and to impose measures, impose punishments and recommend measures for it. Under the case Shaheen Abdullah versus Union of India, the court had observed that the authorities must register FIR. If any information is received that a person is engages in hate speeches, then an FIR must be registered, else it will amount to a contempt of the court. There were detailed guidelines also which were given by the Supreme Court in Tehseen Poonawalla versus Union of India. It's a recent case of 2018. The court observed that there should be comprehensive guidelines regarding the prevention of hate crimes, including mob violence, lynching, etc. And there should be preventive measures, remedial measures and punitive measures which should be put in place. Preventive measures to ensure that in future hate speeches do not happen, and remedial and punitive measures, they are to ensure that the people who are engaging in such behavior, they do not go unpunished. There should be fast track trials for the accused, and the victims of hate speeches, they should be compensated. There should be deterrent punishment, which means that the punishment should be so high that in future there is deterrence, in future nobody indulges in hate speech. There should be disciplinary action which should be taken against the lax law enforcement officials, that is the officials who are not doing their duty, and the nodal officer should be appointed to take note of the hate crimes and register FIRs. That is, there should be nodal officers in each district specifically to take note of the hate crimes, etc. Now the next article is related to drug menace. The context behind it is the drug menace in Punjab, and Punjab is grappling with this for quite long. This is important in GS2 in governance, in GS3 also under internal security, under drug trafficking conduits, etc. And it can be asked like a case study in GS4 under ethics also. Now what are the factors which are making that reason a victim of drug menace, or in general in India also, how is this functioning? When we look at the geographical position of India, India is located between the Golden Crescent and the Golden Triangle. The Golden Crescent is the region including Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is the region where opium is produced. And the Golden Triangle is the region in Southeast Asia which includes the countries of Myanmar, Laos and Thailand. Therefore, the heroin comes into India from Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as from Myanmar. Hashish comes into India from Nepal, and there are various drug routes in India which make India a victim of this menace. Also, there are sea routes, because 70% of the illegal drugs which are smuggled into India, they are coming through the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal region. There are organized crimes also which are responsible for this menace, because there is a nexus between the three P's, the peddlers, the politicians and the police as well, in some regions which are particularly infested with the drug menace and the drug rackets. They operate in coherence and it leads to more corruption also in the organizations. There is an angle of terror as well. It is contributing to the growth of the drug rackets. For example, the 1993 serial blasts in Mumbai, as well as the 2015 terror attack in Pathankot also, there were links which were established by NIA and other law enforcement agencies between the terrorists and the drug traffickers. There is a factor of technology as well. The technology is a double-edged sword in the case of the drugs. For example, now drones are used to deliver drugs across borders. That drones are flown from Pakistan and then they are dropping drugs in the nearby regions, in the nearby border regions in Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, etc. Plus, there is the usage of dark web. Through the dark web, there is a trading of drugs which happens, because in the internet, normally the websites where the drugs are sold or peddled, they are usually curbed. But in the dark web, there is very little control of the government or the law enforcement agencies. There are socio-economic reasons also which leads to the promotion of the drugs. For example, in the regions where there is unemployment, lower levels of education, it leads to further less incomes and this vicious cycle of poverty. There the poor people, they are easily convinced by the various drug peddlers to join their modules. There is the issue of synthetic drugs also. Usually the drugs like opium, cannabis, they are produced through plants. Now producing the plant-based drugs, it requires land. And the land is usually surveyed, controlled by the governments through various mechanisms. Therefore, it becomes difficult to control them, the areas of the drugs. But there are some synthetic drugs also. These drugs, they do not need any plants for their production. They can be produced in labs. For example, if you have seen the TV series Breaking Bad, there is the production of methamphetamine by Walter White. So such drugs in the form of meth, as it is known, in the form of crystals, powders, etc., they can be made in labs itself rather than getting it from some plants. And there is the issue of law enforcement they have less staff and poor training mechanisms to specifically target the drug peddlers and their newer modules. Now, what are the measures taken to control this menace? When we look at the legislative measures, the government came up with the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. Accordingly, the quality standards of the drugs which are sold and prescribed in India, they are controlled, and it also controls the illicit distribution of various drugs. The Narcotics, Drug and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985 specifically controls the production, manufacturing, cultivation, possession, sale, purchase, transport, storage and or consumption of these drugs as well as the psychotropic substances. And there is the Prevention of Illicit Trade and Traffic in Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1988 to control the illicit traffic of the drugs and psychotropic substances. And there is the institutional mechanism also, that is Narcotics Control Bureau, which implements the provisions of the NDPS, that is Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, and it gathers intel as well as engages with other law enforcement agencies for sharing information and for cracking down on the drug peddlers, etc. Now, when we look at the international measures, there is the Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs 1961. It is to ensure that the production and usage of the narcotics drugs, that is for exclusively medical and scientific purposes only, not for other purposes. The Convention on Psychotropic Substances 1971, it is to ensure that there are control mechanisms over the synthetic drugs, the production of synthetic drugs as per their abuse potential. If it is very much prone to abuse, then it is highly controlled, and if it is having more medicinal value rather than abuse potential, then it is not controlled as much under the Convention on Psychotropic Substances 1971. There is the United Nations Convention also against illicit traffic in narcotics, drugs and psychotropic substances of 1988. This comes up with comprehensive measures, not only for the banning or prohibition or control of illicit drugs, but also for controlling money laundering which is associated with it, and the diversion of precursor chemicals. Precursor chemicals are those chemicals which are used to further make the synthetic drugs. They are like the raw material for the synthetic drugs. The other measures include the initiatives of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, including National Action Plan for Drug Demand Reduction for 2018 to 2025. The Ministry of Social Justice also came up with a scheme, the Scheme for Prevention of Alcoholism and Substance, that is drug abuse. Under this scheme, the ministry gives financial assistance to NGOs, various organizations, for setting up and running rehabilitation centers. The other measures can be ensuring that border security is up to the mark, that there is less cross-border trafficking of drugs, and the Nasha Mukt Bharat campaign. Now, what can be the suggestions to control the drug menace? One, there has to be coordination, better coordination among the enforcement agencies, including Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, the Narcotics Control Bureau, the Central Drug Standards Control Organization, and various other agencies, etc. And the drug trafficking networks, they have to be dismantled. For this, there needs to be the sharing of information, sharing of intelligence between the agencies, and more stringent punishments should be imposed. The law should be more stringent so that in future there is deterrence against it. The de-addiction can be another method, that is a method to control the demand side of the drug menace, and we can ensure that the citizens are also engaged in this comprehensive measure. We can go for various campaigns to control the drugs, role models, awareness campaigns and programs, and above all, we can try to harness the demographic dividend that is at the disposal of India to ensure that the youth, they are engaged in productive work rather than becoming a victim of drug abuse because of lack of work. The next article is related to Special Marriage Act. The context behind it is that the Madhya Pradesh High Court, while dismissing an interfaith couple's petition seeking protection, has said that the marriage of a Muslim man and a Hindu woman Even if it is registered under the Special Marriage Act, it is not valid. It is not valid under the personal laws. So we'll be discussing the Special Marriage Act. This is important in GS2 under governance. What is Special Marriage Act? The Special Marriage Act is a legal framework. This is a legal framework for the marriage of people belonging to different religions or castes, and here the state is sanctioning the marriage. Rather than the religion sanctioning the marriage, the state is sanctioning the marriage. How is it different from other personal laws? There are other personal laws like Hindu Marriage Act, Muslim Marriage Act, etc. In the special case of Special Marriage Act, there is no need of any conversion. The acts including Hindu Marriage Act or Muslim Marriage Act, they require the people from different faiths, they have to convert to that faith before getting married. There is no requirement of getting converted to another faith, another religion under the Special Marriage Act. Both the partners can keep on practicing their own independent faiths. And there is only one single ground of divorce which is mentioned under the Special Marriage Act, that is irretrievable breakdown of marriage. Whereas there are other grounds of divorce which are mentioned in other personal laws. For example, the Hindu Marriage Act allows divorce on the grounds of cruelty, desertion, etc. And the registration of the marriage is mandatory under the Special Marriage Act, whereas it is not mandatory in other personal laws like Hindu Marriage Act. Now, what are the provisions of the Special Marriage Act? One, its applicability. It is applicable to the people who are professing the faiths including Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, Jains and Buddhists, etc. It provides for recognition of marriage through the mechanisms including registration. Registration of the marriage is mandatory under the Special Marriage Act. It provides protections to the couple, their rights, social protection, etc. It is ensured, and it forbids polygamy. Any person who marries again after getting married under the Special Marriage Act, he is committing an offense. It provides for the provision of written notice that under Section 5, the people who are intending to get married, the people belonging to two different faiths, they have to give a notice to the marriage officer of the district, and also they must have lived at least 30 days in that district before applying for marriage under the Special Marriage Act. And under Section 7, after the publication of this notice, the notice of intention to marry, after the publication, within 30 days, any person can object to this marriage. There is an age limit also. It provides that the males who are more than 21 years of age and females who are more than 18 years of age, they can get married under the Special Marriage Act. But there are certain issues related to the Special Marriage Act. One, the objections to the marriage. That after the publication of the notice of the intention to marry, within 30 days anybody can raise an objection. Now this provision can be used to harass the consenting couples, ultimately delay their marriage and cause undue harassment. Allahabad High Court had also recently observed that the consenting couples, they can choose not to publish. The consenting couples, they can choose not to publish the mandatory 30-day notice of intention to marry, because there are privacy concerns also. Because this requirement of the notice of the intention to marry, it has to be published. This will violate the privacy of the people who are going to marry, and there is a social stigma also which is attached to it. Now we'll be taking up 4 prelim snippets which are related to first, credit ratings in India, second, RBI annual report, and third, 3D printed engine, and fourth, by Vivekananda Rock Memorial. The first prelim snippet is related to credit ratings. The credit ratings, they are given by independent agencies. The independent agencies like Moody's, etc., they determine the credit worthiness of individuals, corporations and governments, whether that entity, an individual, corporation or a government, deserves to be given credit, whether they will be able to pay it back, etc. or not. They assign credit ratings to debt securities and other financial instruments as well. And the investors, they benefit from these credit ratings, because the investors, they will get an idea, they will have an opinion about the risk that will be associated. Higher the credit rating, lower will be the risk which will be involved in that investment. Lower the credit rating, more will be the risk irrespective of the returns which are promised on that investment. Usually the issuer pays model was practiced. That is, the credit rating agencies, they are paid by the agency or the institution whom they are rating. That is, the entity which is being rated by the credit rating agency, it is paying the credit rating agency. Therefore, they have that incentive that they will be giving it a better rating or a higher rating. Therefore, there were certain issues with it. Now, what are the importance of the sovereign credit ratings? One, it is like a credit worthiness marker, that it is the credit worthiness of this particular government, and it shows the government's ability and the willingness to repay the debt. It also assesses the borrowing ability of any entity. It affects the interest rates also for the governments and businesses. If any government is having better credit rating, then the interest rates on which it will be borrowing money from external sources, that will be lesser. Likewise, the businesses which are having their presence in that country, they will be able to borrow money at lesser interest rate because the credit rating of that economy, of that nation is better. It will be setting a safety benchmark also, as the risks associated are disclosed, and it impacts the mass poverty as well as economic productivity as well, because usually the developing countries, the low income countries, they are not given good credit ratings by the credit rating agencies, and hence they are not able to borrow funds at less interest rates, which further leads to funds crunch in such countries, impacting further the economy and poverty in these countries. The next article is related to the RBI annual report. There has been an increase in the balance sheet of RBI this year. The increase is 11% year on year, and now it has increased to 70 trillion rupees as of March 31, 2024, that is the ending of fiscal year 24. How it has increased? How does RBI has more funds? It is driven by its liquidity and foreign exchange operations, forex operations. When we look at the asset side, there has been a rise in the foreign investments. The foreign investments in India have risen by 13.9% year on year. The gold has also increased, which is in possession, and the loans and advances, they have also increased. Whereas when we look at the liability side, there has been an increase in the notes which are issued by the RBI as well as the deposits. Therefore, the balance sheet has seen an increase. Now the balance sheet has now normalized to its pre-pandemic level because it has grown 24.1%. It has grown to 24.1% of the GDP, which was there at the end of March 2024. This has also led to a surge in the net income of RBI. The net income of RBI has increased by 141% year on year, and it is due to mainly sharp reduction in the expenditures and particularly the lower provisions, the provisions which the RBI makes to cover the bad debts or the bad investments, etc. The RBI's expenditure has declined by about 56%, and this includes the provision of 42,000 crores that it makes for the contingency fund. The contingency fund is kept within the RBI, that is a fund for the tough times, and the amount which is transferred as a surplus to the central government, it is at a high because the surplus which was transferred in fiscal year 24 is 2.1 trillion rupees. Now the next article is related to a 3D printed rocket engine which was launched by a startup, Agniban Sorted, a suborbital tech demonstrator. Now what is a suborbital launch? This is a launch where it reaches, the space flight reaches the outer space, but it does not complete an orbit around Earth. Therefore, the trajectory of the space flight, it intersects the Earth's atmosphere or surface. So it doesn't become an artificial satellite which is rotating around the Earth, neither does it reach escape velocity. So it is a customizable two-stage launch vehicle, and it has a payload of up to 300 kg when it enters into an orbit of about 700 kilometers. The engine is a semi-cryogenic engine, that is, it has a combination of both liquid and gaseous propellants. The temperatures, because it is a semi-cryogenic engine, they are higher than the cryogenic engines but lower than the traditional rocket engines. It uses refined kerosene instead of liquid hydrogen because refined kerosene is lighter and therefore it can be stored at normal temperatures and it takes up less space. Therefore, the amount of space which is left to carry the payload, that is more if we are using refined kerosene rather than liquid hydrogen. And above all, what is the aim of this? It aims at showing homegrown technologies and together crucial flight data as well as accessing both high and low inclination orbits. Now the next article is related to Vivekananda Rock Memorial, as the Prime Minister is going to meditate there. This is a monument in Kanyakumari. It is located at the tri-junction of Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. This was built in 1970 and it has a life-size bronze statue of Swami Vivekananda, as Swami Vivekananda is said to have attained enlightenment on the rock. He was meditating in Kanyakumari before going on a trip to Chicago for addressing the famous World Conference on Religions. It has two main structures, one is the Vivekananda Mandapam and another is Shripad Mandapam. Thank you.